Okay, so I'm going to try a little technological magic here. We'll see if it works. Couldn't figure out a way to get ARC to actually play sound effects for me. They may have been able to. I just didn't try very hard. Let's see. Yeah. Can you hear that? Where's the speaker? So those of you who have seen the movie, great movie, and I'm going to use that as my theme. I like having a theme for these kind of talks, so appreciate your patience with that little bit of technological, chicanery there. So I'm an M&E technology fellow, so in Dow we have a technology track that's similar to what we have in R&D. So most people are familiar with the term research fellow, and in your mind it kind of brings up some person that's kind of reached the top of a research discipline or organization. The same holds for manufacturing and engineering. So technology fellows are the top of the technical track in Dow. And so we have a group of them dedicated to manufacturing and engineering, focusing on different areas of technological need inside the company. My particular focus is in two areas. One is manufacturing cybersecurity, so I have functional ownership for that. And the second is what we call the digital thread, which is a big part of our Industry 4.0 journey. So I'm going to focus in on the manufacturing cybersecurity part of it for this talk. And I'll start with the good. A lot of times for cybersecurity stuff, we like to start with the bad or even the ugly, right? Because you want to get people scared and ready to listen. But I would argue, and Chris and I were just talking, I think we are at the point now where the bad is sort of understood. We have been talking to people about why we do this. And why should we be interested in cybersecurity? But today, most people at least have a feeling like there's a threat out there. Yeah? They've got a gut feel, and we've done enough education. So starting with the good is a good thing. We've been hearing about this all week. Here's another. This is the World Economic Forum from a couple years ago. So these numbers and the slope of the graphs may have changed. But if you look at capabilities. So these are digital capabilities, right? And you go back to mainframe and PCs and Web 1.0 and Web 2.0. A couple of things should strike you about this graph. One is the pace of these capabilities is accelerating, right? So it's a geometric progression in how fast a new capability not only comes up to speed, but then gives some ability to change the way you do work. The other is that the next one on the horizon appears fairly quickly, right? So, there was a kind of a long lag through some of these, but now what we're seeing is these technological advancements are coming pretty fast. And these are kind of worldwide advances. They're not aimed at manufacturing and engineering, right, operations, but what we need to decide is how we take advantage of them and how do we do that in a way that balances our primary goal, which is to have safe and reliable operations. Right? So on this one hand, you've got this kind of increasing pace of technology and the abilities it brings us. And the other hand, you've got plants that you need to run and in fact are designed to run for 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 80 or 90 or 100 years, right, on systems. The other striking thing about this was back, and I think this is from 2016 from the World Economic Forum, they looked at the global market, right, for this for the newest set, right? So if you look at IoT and smart machines and big data, $100 trillion business opportunity. So who knows what economists put that together. But what we all know, and we can all feel it, and you can hear it from our board of directors and our chairman, is that the opportunity is big. So the good news is we have opportunity. And if we step back now and look at what Dow's doing, right? So if we look at Dow Material Science, so those of you who know, Dow and DuPont joined together a couple of years ago, and we're about to split into three. So I represent Dow Material Science. That's going to be basically the Dow that moves forward. There'll be a DuPont and then an ag company called Corteva. But if you look at how we're interpreting this digital revolution and how we're internalizing it and turning it into what we want to do, we really are focused in a few areas, and to us, it's all about visibility, agility, reliability, and innovation, right? So reliability is always there for us, right? And if you go down to the bottom, safety is the primary overriding goal. But if you look at what we're doing with digital, it's those areas. And it's really about the speed of business. How fast can we respond to a customer? How intimate can we get with our customers, right? In a lot of cases, we sell commodity chemicals, but does that mean we shouldn't have a close relationship? We shouldn't have something we add to what we bring to our customers that make them want to do business with us. Optimize and integrated technology, right? So we are world leaders in our material science endeavors, right? So the chemistry, the physics, right? The equipment and the processes we develop. But how do we now embed digital technology to drive that advantage even further and to make sure that we deliver what we know, right, about chemistry and deliver it faster and better and more easily out to our customers? And then physical and cyber safety. So we have begun to turn the corner, which a lot of talks have focused on today, about where physical safety and cyber safety come together and where does security and safety, how do they interweave? So a key part of our digital Dow approach is to adopt a culture, right, that talks about cyber safety and physical safety, right, at the same time, or at least in concert. So now we move to the bad, and this is the typical kind of threat slide. It's a little bit of a newer one that I got from my threat intelligence guy. But if you look, we all know, and we've been feeling for the past 5 or 6 years especially, that the threat was growing. But there's been a couple of events in the last year or so. The Triton malware that targeted safety systems. If you read about that and it didn't send a shiver up your spine, then you probably don't know what a safety instrumented system is. Because it is extremely scary to think that there is some attacker with bad intent out there who not only is going to come after our control system or figure out how to affect the control system, but is going to dig deeper and try to figure out, oh, you know what? These guys can respond, or at least they might be able to survive without an incident, a safety incident, if I affect their control system. Let me go after this other thing that has safety in front of it. You know, those are the last line of defense in a lot of cases for how we're going to make sure our plants shut down safely. And so for an attacker or some dedicated hacker out there to even know that such a thing exists, and two, to go after it, no matter how they got to it. It's almost immaterial to me how they got to it. The point is that is now out there as a potential threat. So that's real scary. We got the insiders and vendors, and I don't mean to insult our suppliers, but there's the idea of you're only as safe or as secure as your supplier is if you let them come in and hook into your network or plug something in. The thing that happened about the mid to late last year where there was an industrial control honeypot set up, and within 2 days it was compromised and people were it's incredibly fast the way the black hat or the attacker community has reacted, right, to the opportunity represented by manufacturing. And so there's a couple of cases here. So the bad is that digitalization in general multiplies the effect of these kind of attacks. Right? The more we connect things and the more we depend or at least utilize capabilities that connect things and drive signals along wires, right, between systems, the faster an attacker who gains a foothold can start moving among those systems, right? So if you look at it, we have segmentation and as Eric said, it's really system segmentation, not network segmentation. That's been a bulwark. I mean, that's been one of our traditional defenses, right? It's sort of like, if you went to castles in the Middle Ages, you saw high walls with, the archers on top. That's been a key part of what we do. What we're finding in the digital world and with all the increasing need, right, to drive connectivity, that those segmentation security is not always enough. And in fact, attackers are finding very clever ways to get through that. Industrial IoT solutions, right? We've heard it over and over again. There's going to be billions or trillions of these things, depending on who you listen to. As you connect those in, they, in general, don't have a very mature security model around them. So there's work going on. But the more we try to take advantage of some sensor somewhere that's, detecting corrosion under insulation, and it's, a low power sensor, and it costs me $200, and I just plug it in, and I start getting a read, right? What security risk does that represent? And in fact, it at least represents something you need to know about and think about. talk about integration with the cloud, whether it's the control system or other systems connected to your control system. And this last one is an interesting one, right? So if you go out and try to hire a cybersecurity person right now, it's very difficult to find a good, solid skill, right, mix. The university is starting to catch up. There's some universities that are doing a good job, but those are going to be very raw talent that you get. And what makes it worse is in the manufacturing side, right? In the specifics around operational technology, it's even harder to find the right people. And so this skill shortage is coming at a time when, if we had the perfect situation, this skill would be prevalent, so that as we drive digitalization, we could draw from that to help us respond to the threat. But instead, we've got this case where we're trying to digitalize, we're trying to take advantage of advanced capability, and we've got an increasingly small pool of people to draw from, or at least it's not growing the way we need it to. So, the ugly, and this is where safety comes in, right? So the good is the fact that there's opportunity. The bad is kind of a cybersecurity, reliability of systems. The real ugly is physical safety, right? And the connection between cyber and physical. So one of the ways to think about it is you can think about your plant, your facility, right, as a whole. What we have started to do is that's not good enough. We need to start thinking about, the facility as a whole and what it represents, but are there certain high-risk areas of that facility? Or do we have to further think about and get deeper into where the real high-risk areas of that facility are? Especially in the world where drones and wireless connections and cellular connections are being allowed into the plant, if you allow them, right, to do all sorts of advanced digital kind of capabilities, digital procedures and all sorts of stuff. You start to break down this idea that the site has a fence line and that fence line has meaning somehow. In the cyber world, it starts to lose meaning. Right? So the fence line doesn't really mean anything anymore if you're taking advantage of some of these advanced digital capabilities. And you need, as I said, manufacturing cybersecurity is a main area of mine, and so is connecting data. So I'm schizophrenic, right? Because part of me wants to not allow any connections, and the other part wants to allow every connection. But I would argue that every company has to have, if not in one person, then in two people who are peers, having that argument and that discussion, right, to make sure that there's a balance of those forces, right? And you can see, right, from kind of the need for safety and cyber, there's all sorts of pressures on that, from geographic to geopolitical to increasing regulatory kind of scrutiny. So a bonus ugly, right? And I couldn't talk about this topic, and Eric actually alluded to it, without talking about what we call technical debt. If you're not familiar with that term, it's all the old crap you got that you keep running but don't know quite what to do with, but it's still working, so you don't want to get rid of it. So these legacy investments, right, they cause two things to happen, right? One is they do kind of delay your ability to take advantage of some advanced digital capabilities. So from an opportunity point of view, they will slow you down or at least make you do some extra work to get to those capabilities. The other side is that from a cybersecurity point of view, as we start to work with our suppliers and we start working with advanced architectures and advanced, security designed into systems, those old systems aren't going to have any of that, right? They're just going to sit there. They're going to be the same old dumb system they always were. And the fact is, you've run your plant for 25 years using that old Foxborough system, so why the heck would I ever upgrade the DCS, right? Or the control code? Or why would I ever upgrade my, Windows NT operating system that's running on? Because the thing's running. The problem is, in today's threat environment, that those things now are exposed to a degree they never were. And so this technical debt discussion is all about the operating system, the process control and automation systems, the network equipment, which is sometimes overlooked when you talk about this, but we tend to all have switches and all sorts of stuff behind the firewall where we segmented. And that stuff tends to get old too, because you know what, if you're a site manager or plant manager and you've got something that's going to add $1 million of margin to your plant or volume to your plant, and you've got somebody telling you, no, you got to spend some money on these switches, it's easy to see which way the plant manager is going to go, unless you make a convincing argument and start to get into some of this, what they're losing or what they're risking. So the question is, how do we get to the good? How do we get to Clint Eastwood, right? Without getting through the bad, or we keep the bad and the ugly at bay, right? So, and Dow, we have taken a kind of a holistic approach. So a couple of years ago, we realized that while we were still had some leadership positions around manufacturing cybersecurity based on, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? And Eric, I just made him choke on his water. But we had some really good, and so we were very, very good and adept at what we did. We needed to take a step back. And so we have really gone after 3 areas. One is to have a foundational model in place. What's interesting about this model is, and the kind of the size of the pyramid, it kind of reflects the amount of impact you get at each layer, and to some degree the amount of work it takes, right? So control is a great thing, but control without organizational culture, right, to keep those controls working or to pay attention to the control or to pay attention to that signal really is not worth much. And so as you work your way up, we've identified, right, actions and things that we want to do around every one of these, and we have been working over the last couple of years to figure out, okay, what's the right mix and how do we roll this out and how do we implement in a way that kind of honors the multifaceted requirements here, right? It's not all about technology or controls. It's not all about culture, because you need to have some tools, so it's a mix. We also have made the decision that the NIST framework is a really good framework for us to describe this, both to our executives and our board of directors, and when necessary, out to external entities, government, DHS. And so it's a great way to describe what we're doing, and it provides us with a logical grouping for the work that we're doing, right? Are we working on identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, and how do we start to link the work we're doing back to the real impact it's having and what we're going after? And the last part is it's comprehensive, so it's not just about technology, it's about standards and people and processes and governance. And so it's not enough to just roll out new technology, and you've heard that lots of times this week. So the other part that we have just started, so technical debt, I mean, I stand up here and talk about it like it's one of those ugly little secrets, right? It's the elephant in the room. So we've had it forever. It's not something that just occurs today. But what we realized as we moved forward on our cybersecurity program and our Industry 4.0 program is it was starting to become an impediment, right? So we had situations where we had an opportunity, right, to generate money or to reduce risk for the Dow Chemical Company, and we couldn't get there because we had to do some basic infrastructure stuff. We had to reduce that technical debt, get rid of it, replace it. And so one of the ideas here is we right now are working with our leadership, operations leadership, right, and IT leadership to some degree, but it's really operations, to talk about if you've had a process control or process automation system upgrade on your project list for the last 5 years, and you keep knocking it off the list because you have more important things to do, we understand that, right? But now is the time to take a look and see whether or not that process control upgrade or that operating system upgrade or that networking infrastructure upgrade is now keeping you from getting to either an opportunity that you want to go after on behalf of the company or incurring some extra risk. And it's not the way operations people think, right? I mean, they don't think about the infrastructure. To them, infrastructure is the pipes and the equipment. It's not all this electronic stuff. The problem is we don't have a plant in Dow that doesn't depend on this infrastructure to run. So it's critically important, and we have started the discussion. We're not at the end of the discussion, but so I don't argue, right, that an operating system or a network or a DCS upgrade should be number one, in a large site's list for next year. But I argue that it shouldn't be number 42 and drop off every year for the next 5 years, right? So it's all about balance. We need to be able to, the bigger we, need to be able to engage in those conversations. And I would argue the IT folks can be some help, but I can tell you that when we go to Dow IT folks, they have this same exact kind of conversation, right, with the functions they support. So it's not always that there's a ready answer. Sometimes it's just hard work, right? You got to work through it and make sure it gets the right attention. So thank you for listening. And am I supposed to introduce the next person? Or are you going to do that? What?